Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Zehra, and I'm delighted to welcome you all on today's webinar titled Exploring the Role of Caste Census in Ensuring Equal Representation for Minority Rights, organized by South Asia Research Institute for Minorities. Today's session promises to be enlightening and thought provoking. Before we delve onto a discussion, let's take a quick look at the speakers today. So, today we are having Cynthia Stephen, Dr. Goldy M. George, Leslie Martin, and Degree Prasad Chouhan, all hailing from India. First, we will hear from our speakers who will bring wealth of knowledge and experience to the table and following their presentation. And in the last, we will gain insight from Rimsha Shahid, research analyst at South Asia Research Institute for Minorities, who will provide the concluding remarks on the significance of today's discourse. Now, let me introduce our first speaker, Cynthia Stephen, a prominent Dalit activist, writer, social policy researcher, and journalist from India. Cynthia's work focuses on advocating the rights of marginalized communities, particularly Dalit. Thank you once again for joining us today to delve into this crucial topic. Over to you, Cynthia.
Thank you so much. I think it's a very good move on the part of SARIM to have this topic at this point. As you know, the history of the caste census is a very checkered one. In India, we have had the census, and the only caste data the census has been collecting is the SC/ST categories only. So whether the population, which population share of the population are scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. The other groups, though they are it is gathered, it is not broadly analyzed, and they are all lumped into the non-Dalit category, more or less, the non-SC/ST, as in that. Of course, we also have the backward classes, which are a significant chunk of the population, and depending on the state in which we are talking about, they constitute from 85 to 60% of the of a state's population. Overall, we find that OBCs constitute about overall across India, they constitute 60 to 70% of the population. So that is the situation in India, and there has been a long-standing demand for the caste census. Why is there a demand for the caste census? Because without knowing the backward classes are backward, but they are not a homogeneous group. There are many categories within them. Some of them, so we have actually two very broad categories. They say upper and lower. We don't use those. In our activist language, we do not use upper and lower, but we say the more powerful and the less powerful ones. So the ones the ones who are considered to be more powerful are the backward classes whose identities and incomes and livelihoods are linked to the land. So we have in various sections of the country, we have land owning backward classes. For instance, in northern India, we have the Yadavs, who traditionally are livestock rearers. So the Yadavs are the people who rear cows, not sheep, the large cattle, but they also are landowners. And in I would say in UP and Bihar, they are called Yadavs, that community. In Haryana and Punjab, they are called Jats. And in South India, we have the Reddys, we have the Lingayats, and in Maharashtra, we have other landowner. The Marathas are one of the categories which own land and work on the land. So like that, in Tamil Nadu, we have a number of political. Now, the important thing about these castes is that they all are, as a result of their being linked to the land, they also, and that's the primary resource, they also tend to have economically stronger status. Consequently, also economically, politically stronger states. Now, this because of historic reasons, the education attainment of these castes was not very high in the earlier days. Of course, say in the last 25, 30 years, there has been a change after the Mandal Commission report, which discovered that the backward classes had much lower educational attainment and higher professional qualifications were not very high among them. So once the Mandal Commission report was implemented, then in the 80s, then there's been a slow and gradual but steady increase in their educational attainment in the that is the backward classes of all categories. But of course, as you know, those who are economically better off can afford better education and higher professional qualifications, so they've got higher. Now, this is in the broad sense. What about the other the non-landowning backward classes? These tend to be the artisanal castes. So the metal workers, that is blacksmiths, goldsmiths. Then, of course, goldsmiths have a slightly higher ritual status because they are working with precious metals. But blacksmiths, carpenters, then oil talis, we call it, the ones who crush the oil and manufacture the oil. So these communities, then also dhobis, then potters. So all these are closely allied to the important livelihood requirements of the mainstream population. And so, though they are not outcast, they are considered in some areas they are considered untouchables. For instance, the in UP, Dhobis, then potters and all are considered untouchable. In South India, that's not the case. They are categorized, and the Babas, they are categorized as backward classes. So it depends. There is some variation. But these people are not closely linked to land, so their economic status is not high. Their services, they offer services to the mainstream. So their economics, and some of them are, traditional work. So they do traditional caste duty. So they don't necessarily get paid economically. So Kumhar might get, in the past, the arrangement was that each household will give this much grain to the Kumhar's family, and they keep the family supplied with pots. So it's a kind of a barter system. They don't really get money. So they have been quite economically disadvantaged, as a result of which their education statuses also have gone down. Now, the need to understand the real status is the reason why we have to have a caste census. But for whatever reason, for what idea, it's really difficult. But if you look at it one way, it's not difficult to understand. There has been opposition to the caste census in that country. And the reason is that if the backward classes understand how much they have been disadvantaged, then they will become like a sleeping giant and threaten the existing power structures. So this has been like the core of, and then some people will say, oh, that is way of reinforcing the caste. But you cannot make policy decisions or design policy or allocate funding without having statistics. And statistics cannot be got without a census. So it's like a chicken and egg situation, or a rather catch-22 situation. So if there's no data, you can't allocate funds. And if you can't allocate funds, these communities cannot grow. But if we can only allocate funds if you know the numbers. And for the numbers, you have to have a caste census. But that is being opposed. So this is a kind of a like enmeshed problem in which we have been caught. Now, I would like to mention here my examination a bit of the situation in Karnataka, which is considered one of the more progressive states of India, and particularly also in South India, other than Tamil Nadu. I think Karnataka's strength has been that we're in one section, that is the area which was ruled by the Mysore Maharaja, was only the second kingdom in the country to implement reservations for the backward classes as far as in the 19th century. You see, so there has been of course, the pioneers in this was Sahuji Maharaj of Maharashtra. The next was the king of Mysore, the Maharaja of Mysore, and as a result of which, the number of more educated and professionally placed backward classes is higher in Karnataka than in other places, barring Tamil Nadu. Because in Tamil Nadu, as you know, there's a different arrangement, and so there has been a social movement which has promoted the non-Brahmin castes to progress both socially, economically, and politically. And so the non-Brahmins backward classes are quite strong in Tamil Nadu in terms of numbers. Anyway, so I won't go into Tamil Nadu, but in Karnataka. So since we're here focusing on how that has helped minorities, Karnataka is a very important case in point. Now, according to the last census, 2011 census, the minorities got about 16 to 18% of the population. Now, what kind of minorities? This is religious minorities I'm talking about. So we have, these are the main broadly I can think of as a larger number of. There are some Buddhists in certain sections of the thing. So all these religious minorities constitute about 18% of the 16 to 18% of the population of Karnataka, of which, of course, Muslims were about 12. So the issue is that the minorities constitute a sizable chunk of the population. And of these minorities, among the Muslims and the Christians, there is some caste categorization. And so to understand how Karnataka has dealt with the situation is that it has given a special category for the Christians. I'm using Christians as an example. So there are Christians who are given their identity as Christians, and there are those who have converted from SC also. So while they have large number of categories, there is a category 3A in which Christians are broadly lumped, but there's another category 1A in which Christians who are converted from SC origin are included. Now, the importance of that is that this 1A category does not have an income limit. As you know, the categorization is not only of caste but also of income. Broadly, when you talk about the Mandal Commission, they call this creamy layer. So those who are above a certain category of income, they are excluded from the reservations. So while in general minorities have 5% reservation among all this, so then of course if you're a minority and apply with the minority religious identity, you will be having a 5% reservation. But if you are under that, if you also submit that you are, if you, instead of using the 3A reservation, if you get a 1A certificate, you will get a 4% reservation within your own category. So that's a much better advantage. So this is the way in which Karnataka has tried to use its caste diversity in a manner which is useful to the society and those who have been disadvantaged. At the same time, Muslims also, there are very wide categories. There are many categories among Muslims, some who are very financially and educationally advanced and others who are very, very poor. So there also we have some categories. I have not studied the way in which Muslims have been categorized. Definitely they fall under the Muslim minority category, and they also have certain category, some income type disparity and can apply under that as well. Now, overall, we have in India another category called EWS, and 10% reservation is there for that. EWS is economically weaker sections. And actually, these minorities are also eligible to apply under that, subject to the income cap. So the income cap of 8 lakhs is given if you are wanting to apply under EWS category. So that is also a benefit. So these are the simple ways in which overlapping central and state in Karnataka populations, in theory, these things exist. How much people are actually taking advantage of it, even if they know and they've applied, whether they actually get to enjoy that is another story. But definitely in theory, the opportunities, there has been some kind of attempt to address situation of Karnataka, of minorities and of that religious minorities in Karnataka. So I think I've almost run off my time. I've taken a lot of time. Thank you for your opportunity. I hope that I have not exceeded my time, and I would hand the session back to the moderator. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. Well defined. Thank you for shedding light on the reality. Next, we have Dr. Goldy M. George, an activist and social scientist renowned for his contribution on social justice movement in India. Dr. expertise lies in analyzing caste dynamics and advocating for minority rights. The floor is now yours. Over to you.
Thank you very much. And I thank South Asia Research Institute for Minorities for inviting me to be here. I'm happy to see my fellow compatriots, Cynthia, and also degree Prasad. And I am very happy to be here. The theme that you have brought forward today for the discussion, which is exploring the role of caste census in ensuring equal representation for minority rights. I'll put my point broadly in 5 areas. I want to look at it in 5 areas, and then also try to explain the 5 areas one after another. Now, the first thing is we need to understand what is a kind of census in India. The census in India, it all began since 1881, and census has been generally used by government departments and ministries, the policymakers, academicians, and others in order to capture, what kind of population is there. And it's also used to study access to resources, access to what has been discussed is land and other accesses. That's what probably the resources would fall into. And also mapping social change. What has been the social change? And in the past, it has been also used for conducting delimitation exercises. So this is one of the key areas how census has been used in India over the past century and a half almost. Now, when we look at what we are talking is basically it's a socio-economic caste census. Now, this is not exactly a kind of a census what is often seen in and around, and this is a slightly different one, and it also began quite a while ago, almost 100 years, more than 90 years ago. It began. The first time a socio-economic caste census was conducted was in the year 1931. It was first conducted in the year 1931. And the idea was basically to collect information on economic status of Indian population, both in urban and rural areas. And it collected specific information on castes in order to evaluate their economic condition. So the idea was basically it collected information on specific castes in order to evaluate what is their economic status and condition. This was in 1931. In 1941, it could not be conducted because of the political turmoil that went around the world during the Second World War. It was not conducted. And now what we need to understand is that this particular census was very important because for the first time it brought in a different idea that that what is the role of caste. So this is where it is very important. What is the role of caste in intensifying economic deprivation? So what role does caste play in intensifying economic deprivation of certain social groups in the backdoor or in the background of social and cultural discrimination or cultural imperialism and disparities, exclusion, and isolation. So this is basically the idea has been very strongly put up right from there that once when you start looking at caste census, then you'll also have to look at the idea of caste which comes into it. So this is basically, I'm just trying to say there's a second point, which is the socio-economic caste survey. What is it all about? Now, what is the difference between these two? This is important. What's the difference between a normal census and a socio-economic caste census? Now, while census provides a generic portrayal or a generic picture of the population of any country, let's say it's of India, or maybe it's about Sri Lanka or Bangladesh or Pakistan, whichever, or United States of America. It gives a general portrait of that population picture. But socio-economic caste survey, it provides actually a specific picture, very focused picture, and it also identifies the beneficiaries of the state's initiatives, the state's interventions, the state's program, etc. So this is a difference. While it gives you a general picture, the first one, second one gives you specific. It's actually the second, the socioeconomic caste census is more about that the government has a responsibility towards the citizen. So it is responsible. So it indicates, it's actually directs, it gives a clear dimension to the people that it has a specific role to play in the larger content. Now, the second part of this difference is that while the data that is generated through the normal census, those data are actually confidential under the Census Act of 1947, Census Act in 1940. It is a confidential. But the socioeconomic caste census, it is open to be used by the governments, academicians, and policymakers. It is open to them, and also it builds, it creates the scope to bring in new beneficiaries into the fold, and it can also restrict the existing kind of beneficiaries. So we need to understand that these are the differences. Now, where did the caste census? That's a third point. How did the caste census that began in 1931? Where did it go wrong? Where did it stop? After 1931, when India became independent in 1947, after the 1951 census, a decision was taken by the Indian government that they do not want to promote caste census because it is a divisive approach. And instead of having a divisive approach, as a nation, one needs to have a national unity approach. So in order to have a different approach, the caste census was stopped in 1951. But however, with a shift of socio-political dynamics and a shift in the overall picture of Indian state in terms of caste-based groups, there's a need for accuracy of information. B, there is a need for more specific engagement from the side of the government. So there is a demand, as mentioned earlier about the Model Commission. There was Kalakalikar Commission. So you'll find like a series of commissions, a series of studies by governments. One after another has been taken over the decades, and which is why there is a need of caste census. Now, what are the tenets of caste census as such? The first and foremost is what the title of this program itself is, ensuring equality. So basically, it is basically to address the question of social inequalities that has spread in a caste-ridden society. India is still a very strong caste-ridden society. For that reason, I would say not just India, but also the whole of South Asia is a caste-ridden society, whether it's India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Pakistan. These all have got the caste-based social setting. And therefore, when there is caste-based social setting, there is oppression, there is discrimination, there is marginalization, there is suppression, and one could see there's a lack of freedom of expression. There's a lack of freedom of expression overall. So a caste-based census would in fact help in addressing those inequalities in a much specific and powerful way. That's number one. And second is it would also lead to the upliftment of social groups that has been otherwise marginalized and subdued. The second part is second part, that's B. A, I said addressing social inequalities, and B, ensuring equitable distribution of resources. Now we need to understand that there are resources which is in different forms. One of the forms is basically land, but there are also forestry resources. There are also mineral resources. There are also resources in terms of water resources. And basically, as I come from a Central Indian state, these are the states which is filled with so much of natural resources. Apart from that, there are other things which also could be counted as a resource, which is the government employment space. The space for education to the children, to the younger ones. So there are the idea of resource is not just one, but it is multidimensional. So in order to have a possible redistribution of these resources, whether it is land, there is still land redistribution which is still pending right from 1950s onwards. So there is a redistribution of the forest land which is still lying over there. So we can see that India is a very strong hangover, particularly rural India is a hangover of the erstwhile zamindari system. We still have zamindari, in all its forms, with all its tenets, very strongly, very powerfully embedded in our culture, in our social system, in our economic relations, in our political system. So, or otherwise, what we generally look at is greater beings and lesser humans. Greater beings. Some are greater beings. Some certain caste people, certain community people are greater beings. They are almost like God, and there are lesser humans who have no validity. So that kind of a status does not allow certain social groups to have access to resources. Shudra or a Dalit or a untouchable cannot hold any kind of a resource, any kind of land as per the caste rules, as per the law of Manu. So we need to understand that this equitable distribution of resources is a big thing. Second is equitable redistribution of resources also indicates to positive discrimination. Which is basically the reservation policy that we have in India. Now, the reservation policy has been so much misinterpreted and misused, and it is often said like this is actually a thing that is actually expanding the caste system. To be honest, that is something which is to reduce the effect, not actually to demolish caste system, but at least to reduce the effect of caste system and to help people to have upward economic mobility. So that positive discrimination is also a means and method in a political way to assure equitable distribution or economic benefits to sections that has been otherwise, discriminated. Third is that within equitable distribution. The third point is that this kind of a survey would serve as a guiding principle, as a guiding document for any kind of future intervention and exploration. So these are the tenets. And the number C, is to closely monitor the effectiveness of affirmative action, policies, schemes, and programs. So for that, you need a caste census. Without having a caste census, it is absolutely not possible to engage with those social groups in terms of creating and building affirmative action, in terms of evolving locality-specific policies, schemes, programs, and plans. That is not possible. And D is to provide a comprehensive picture of the Indian society, which is basically a caste-based society. There are more what we generally see is a superficial, picture of the society. A superficial picture will not actually tell anybody about the internal crisis that a society is faced with. A society can only grow by addressing those crises. A society will otherwise be doomed, and the society will not be allowed to grow in any form unless and until those internal conflicts and crises that exist for thousands of years are actually addressed. Now, caste is as an integral part of Indian society. It needs to be brought out and it needs to be addressed in a rightful way. E, that's number 5, is it's a constitutional mandate. So, as I said, why this is important? It is basically to address social inequality. It is to address the question of equitable distribution. It's a question to monitor the effectiveness of affirmative action. It's a method to provide a comprehensive picture of Indian society. It is based on a constitutional mandate. So we need to understand that this is how it works. For instance, recently in the month of October last year, 2023, the caste-based survey, which was actually released by the government of Bihar. So nowadays, since I live in Bihar, I get access to this information pretty easily. Now, let me tell you, there is a category. It's a scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and generally we use another term which is OBC, other backward classes. Technically, as per the government, parlance, as per the government application, there is no OBC per se. It's actually SCBC, that is socio-economic backward classes. Now, SCBC is divided into two parts, as it's said, like upper OBC and lower OBC. However, this has been pretty much used in academic and also many other circles. Even activists use it. But technically now there are two differences, which is also essential for to mention here. One is the OBC as OBC, which is basically the upper OBC, and the other is EBC, which is extremely backward classes. So the other backward classes and the extremely backward classes, they all together form the SCBC, the socio-economic backward classes. So a survey of that sort is very important. Now, looking at the question of minorities, it is not just that there are minorities based on religion in India. India has got many types and patterns of minorities. India has got minorities in the name of religion, but there are minorities in the name of language, there are minorities in the name of identities, even in a village, many times you'll find that the Dalit community is just a minority. And similarly, you'll find many EBCs in a rural setting as a minority who actually have been have to face social disparities, inequalities, discrimination, and all. Having said this, I want to point out two facts of the recent SCBC survey of the Bihar government. First is that the OBCs are 27.12% of the total population, and the EBC, the extremely backward classes, are 36.01% of the total population. So they put together, they form more than 63% of the population. I'm not counting others into this, like SC or SC or Muslim minorities or anything per se. Now, interesting fact is that out of the 27.12%, 4%, almost 3.8% of the total population of Bihar that too among the upper OBC constitute of Muslims, and 1% constitute about the Christians. And among the out of in the 36.02% of extremely backward classes, out of the 36% of the total population, you'll see 10% of people come from Muslim background in the EBC. That's extremely backward classes, and in fact they are the ones who are pretty much discriminated and pretty much facing the brunt of the social system. Now, why I think this discussion has a validity not only in the context of the caste survey, but also this discussion with SARIM has a validity in another context, because it's just less than 2 weeks now that the government of India, just before announcing the date of the election, has announced that has announced the new rules for CAA, Citizens Amendment Act. So these two contexts, the Citizen Amendment Act, which is going to deregister people as citizens, which includes Muslims, big number of Muslims, but also good number of Christians, Buddhists, and Sikhs. So you need to understand that there is a deregistration, denationalization of citizens, which is going to happen, and at the same time, there is an election right in front in 3 weeks' time. We are going to have the first round of 4 weeks' time. We're going to have the first round of our elections happen. So this is a critical context, and unless and until we identify the disparities, so as I'm supposed, I don't know whether I should say it or not, but among each of these categories, the interesting part is that among each of these categories, whether it is OBC or EBC, the minority population suffers more because they are still within that they live in a ghettoized kind of a state. Whether it's the Muslims within the OBC, whether it is a Christian who form 1% within the OBC, or whether it is the 10% of the total population Muslims who fall under the category of 36% of EBC in Bihar. I'm specifically talking about the experience of Bihar. We'll see that these people, these populations, they are the ones who live in much difficult terrains. They live mostly in subhuman conditions. So I'll stop it here for now. In case you have any kind of questions, please come up with this. I once again thank SARIM and I thank all the organizing team for inviting me to this. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Perfectly said. Thank you so much for sharing the dynamics of caste census and, of course, your valuable insight. Now joining us, Leslie Martin, a Dalit human rights activist and social justice advocate, deeply committed to address caste-based discrimination in India. Leslie activism has been instrumental in raising the awareness about Dalit issues, both national and international platforms. Thank you for engaging in today's discourse. And now the stage is yours.
Thank you, Zehra. It's been glad that the participants, the speakers who spoke before me have given greater clarity of structurally how census, what is the importance of census and all. And coming to the topic, caste-based census, caste census, and minorities, how the social aspects of minorities are treated. And in this aspect, we have to understand the critical element of the United Nations saying that leave no one behind. The SDG campaign. So into that program, who are all the people to be included? Who are all missing? And how this caste-based census is quite essential to replicate, to value a human being. Caste-based census gives dignity to the human being as it recognizes himself, herself, or she or he herself as a person belonging to India. So that dignity we need to understand, and we need to fight for the caste-based census for human dignity. And who are these people who are going to be are not counted or even though counted, but their status is not shown or shown is, see, we had 2011 caste census, but it has been 24 years. There is a gap of 15 years to 15 years and above. So it is critical to understand what is the importance of caste-based census here. In this situation also, India has diverse castes and religious groupings, and within the caste there are different caste sections are involved, and there are tribes also are living in India, and there are denotified tribes who are also living in India, but their whole position is based upon the Manudharma Shastra system, because for their livelihood they have to depend upon the upper caste rich people to give them arms. So from that situation, Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar has brought in the constitution of reservation and upliftment of the weaker sections or depressed classes. So that is a beautiful constitution that India has given. Now, basing on that constitution, why we are still shying away from caste census? It's been we are living in a 21st century. We should be very, very practical, and caste census gives the practical level of understanding of human beings in India, where what is their status, or what is their number, what is their economic status, what is their social status, what is their political representation in the society. So all these things are clubbed, all these things are integrated in the caste census. So this is the situation in which India is living, and caste census is quite essential at this hour because the gap of 15 years or 20 years of without having a caste census at all. 3 days back, the Supreme Court of India has given a direction to reach out to all the welfare schemes beyond 2011 census. So it has started thinking about how census is quite important and how long the census did not taken place. So that's also one of the important aspects, and we have to thank Supreme Court for bringing in that kind of a direction to reach out to all the people in a dignified manner of the welfare schemes or whatever it is. So once here we have to understand how Supreme Court recognized the value of census and the value of persons. So in that manner, we also have to look at how we can bring in the caste census into reality, and how the socio-economic political representation of the different castes, different tribes, different denotified tribes, different sexual-oriented persons, and their status is exactly known by this caste census. So this is the quite important step we are in, but we should not be shy away from having the reality of caste-based census a reality. So thank you very much, Zehra, and I hope I have spoken. You could understand, you could grasp the point that how important it is to fight for the caste census at this juncture of India, where the authoritarian movement is quite strongly felt by the people at the down, and they're struggling for their life very weakly. And this is the stage that we are in. India is in. So we have to understand the different aspects of the dynamics that are pulling away from this having caste census. Thank you.
Thank you. We totally agree with you. Thank you for sharing the reality and your perspective. And finally, now we have Degree Prasad Chouhan, and other prominent Dalit human rights activists dedicated to challenging caste-based discrimination and promoting equality and justice for Dalits in India. Thank you for being here today. Degree Prasad, may you proceed now.
Thank you. सभी साथियों को जय हिंद। मैं जो जाति जनगणना का जो सवाल है और इसमें जो समान प्रतिनिधित्व का सुनिश्चित करने का जो भूमिका हम जाति जनगणना में देख रहे हैं, वो जो सोशल जस्टिस का जो सवाल है, सामाजिक न्याय का सवाल है, इसके आसपास मैं अपना बात को रखना चाहूंगा। तो पहले तो हमको ये देखना पड़ेगा कि जो जाति का जो गठन है, मतलब भारत देश में जाति का जो प्रादुर्भाव, जाति का जो विकास और जाति का जो वर्चस्व है, अगर हम देखें तो ये जो सांस्कृतिक ब्राह्मणवादी सांस्कृतिक साम्राज्यवाद का जो आधिपत्य है वो कैसा बना यहाँ इस देश में, भारत के भीतर। तो भारत में जब जो यहाँ के मूल जो रहने वाले थे, जो द्रविड़ियन सभ्यता थी, और ऐतिहासिक काल में जब बहुत सारे आक्रमण हुए, बहुत सारे सभ्यता संस्कृतियों का आगमन हुआ, और इसके साथ जो ऐतिहासिक वर्चस्व की लड़ाई हुई, उसमें जब हम देखते हैं कि उस ऐतिहासिक लड़ाई में यहाँ के जो मूलवासी थे, किस तरह से ये धकेल दिए गए अपने मूल जगहों से, जो मुख्य जगहों से एकदम किनारे कर दिए गए। और उसमें हम जब देख पाते हैं कि जाति का जो गठन होता है, मसलन जो एक सोसाइटी में जो सामाजिक सम्मान होता है, उसके साथ जो संपत्ति जिसमें भूमि भी शामिल है, उसके जो वर्चस्व की बात है, या फिर जो तीसरा जो सवाल है कि धार्मिक आस्था केंद्रों का, जो रिलीजियस सेंटर्स हैं, चाहे कोई एनी रिलीजियस हो, इसमें जो वर्चस्व, ये तीन महत्वपूर्ण संस्थानों में जो सोसाइटी को कंट्रोल करने का जो और उस नियंत्रण को पाने का जो ऐतिहासिक वर्चस्व की लड़ाई है, उसके बाद जब हम देखते हैं कि अभी जो वर्तमान में बोलने से हमारे देश की आजादी के पहले से इसका भी इतिहास हजारों साल का इतिहास है। किस तरह से एक सांस्कृतिक साम्राज्यवाद हुआ और जो मूल सभ्यता है, मूल संस्कृति थी, वो हाशिए में धकेल दिए गए और उसको उस दायरे में जो उनकी जो श्रेष्ठता और जो वर्चस्व है, सामाजिक सम्मान का मसला हो, चाहे संपत्ति भूमि का मसला हो, चाहे धार्मिक आस्था केंद्रों पर जो उनका वर्चस्व का मसला है, और तब जब वर्णाश्रम का को थोपा गया यहाँ के निवासियों पे, और अभी वर्णाश्रम को थोपने के बाद उसमें जो जातियां बनी, ये अलग बात है कि यहाँ का जो जाति है 6,000 से अधिक जाति, और उन जातियों के बीच जो प्राकृतिक संसाधनों, जीवन जीने के संसाधनों के उनका जो समान वितरण का जो सवाल है, और ये जो सामाजिक सम्मान, भूमि और धार्मिक आस्था केंद्रों के जो पवित्रता, पवित्रता और उनको धकेल देना, कुछ लोगों की अधिकार होना इन पे और कुछ लोगों का अधिकार नहीं होना। जैसे भूमि हमारे यहाँ पे ये जो ब्राह्मणवादी आधिपत्य का जो काल है जो भारत में, और वर्णाश्रम और जाति का जो प्रभाव है, उसमें कुछ खास जातियों के लिए सारे सामाजिक सम्मान है, सारे संपत्ति है, और आस्था केंद्रों पर भी जो तथाकथित ऊंची जातियां हैं, चाहे कोई भी धर्मों का, उसमें उनका वर्चस्व है, बाकी लोग 2 दर्जे के नागरिक। तो ये जो परिस्थितियां हैं, इस परिस्थितियां में अगर हम जाति आधारित गणना के बाद जो सोशल जस्टिस, जो सामाजिक न्याय का मसला है, उसको अगर हल करना चाहते हैं तो कुछ महत्वपूर्ण बातों को हमको देखना पड़ेगा। पहला बात तो ये कि अभी माननीय सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने एक सवाल उठाया है अपने जो जाति आरक्षण का जो एक सिलसिला चल पड़ा था, और अभी जो मुद्दे हैं हमारे भारत देश में, तो उन्होंने सवाल उठाया था कि जिन पिछड़ी जातियों को रिजर्वेशन का पूरा फायदा मिल चुका है, उन्हें क्या अभी छोड़ देना चाहिए, और बाकी जो लोग रिजर्वेशन का फायदा जिन जातियों को, जिन सब कास्ट को नहीं मिल पा रहा है, उनको वो कैसा होगा। क्योंकि जब हम देखते हैं कि भारत का जो ढांचा है, मतलब यहाँ की जो सामाजिक संरचना है, जो सामंती संरचना है, उसमें अगर आप मैदानी जो प्लेन इलाके हैं, आप उसमें देखें पूरे अमूमन भारत में, तो जो दलित कम्युनिटी है वो अल्पसंख्यक है, और जो ओबीसी जातियां या सो कॉल्ड अपर कास्ट जो जातियां हैं, उनके पास पूरे रिसोर्सेस है, लैंड है, और ये जो अल्पसंख्यक जातियां हैं, ये अनटचेबिलिटी से भी परेशान है। साथ में जो रिसोर्सेस हैं, नेचुरल रिसोर्सेस या लैंड है, ये बिल्कुल हटा दिए गए हैं, और उनके खेत जो होंगे, जो लैंड लॉर्ड वो जो होंगे, जो शोषक जातियां, जो तथाकथित ऊंची जातियां हैं, वो जो दलित आदिवासी जो गांव की संरचना है, उसमें वो उनके खेतों में मतलब मजदूर होंगे, श्रमिक होंगे, या भूदास जिसको कहते हैं, हम इस संदर्भ में कह सकते हैं। तो इन जातियों को इस तरह का जो देश की आजादी के पहले से जो विधान था, जैसा पहले उल्लेख हुआ मनुस्मृति रीति, ये जो विधान है जिसमें संपत्ति और सामाजिक सम्मान पे खास जातियों का जो वर्चस्व है और अधिकार है, बाकी इसके काबिल नहीं है। तो ये जो जातियों का गठन का मकसद था ऐतिहासिक काल में, और ये जाति का चिन्ह हम भारत में देख पाते हैं। लेकिन सवाल यह आता है कि क्या दलित जातियों के भीतर और आदिवासी जातियों के भीतर या जो अल्पसंख्यक समुदाय हैं, उनके भीतर क्या जाति है या नहीं है। क्योंकि मैं ये इस बात पे आना चाहूंगा कि जैसे राजनीतिक प्रतिनिधित्व का बात हो, चाहे सरकारी नौकरियों में आरक्षण का बात हो, इसमें जो दलित जातियां हैं, कुछ दलित जातियां इसमें मुख्य तौर पे हैं, लेकिन बहुत सारे जो सब कास्ट हैं, अभी पूरे भारत देश के भीतर भी ये सवाल अभी आ रहा है कि ये कैसा मसला होगा, क्योंकि सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने भी इस पर टिप्पणी किया है। तो ये जो मध्य भारत का, मैं खास करके जैसे छत्तीसगढ़ का उदाहरण दूं, तो मध्य प्रदेश में भी आप देखें, राजस्थान भी देखें, तेलंगाना में भी देखें, छत्तीसगढ़ में भी देखें, ओडिशा में भी देखें, तो जो दलित जातियां हैं उसमें कुछ डोमिनेंट दलित कास्ट भी हैं, और जो कि जिनको संघर्षरत है और जो बहुत ज्यादा इससे लाभान्वित है रिजर्वेशन से और पॉलिटिकल रिप्रेजेंटेशन से। लेकिन दिगर जो दलितों के भीतर सब कास्ट हैं, दलितों के उपजातियां हैं दलितों की, उनके भीतर जो कि आपस में रोटी बेटी भी नहीं है, मतलब एक, और साथ में उनकी जो स्थिति है जाति जनगणना होने के बाद, क्योंकि जाति गणना SC ST OBC इस तरह के होगा, क्योंकि इसको जब हम जाति जनगणना के भीतर जब उप जातियों को, जो दलित या आदिवासी जातियां हैं, उनके भीतर अगर इसको हम सवाल नहीं करेंगे और इसको आगे लेके नहीं जाएंगे, तो शायद ये जो सोशल जस्टिस का सवाल है ये अधूरा ही रह जाएगा। जैसे एक और उदाहरण है यहाँ छत्तीसगढ़ में दो चीजें हमने देखने को मिला, और ये जाति के भीतर का जो आपसी संघर्ष है, और जो कि बहुत बड़ा बाधक होगा आगे चल के सामाजिक न्याय के लड़ाई में, कि हमने देखा कि एक है सामाजिक बहिष्कार का कानून। सामाजिक बहिष्कार इधर क्या होता है कि इंडिया में, कि जब हम जाति या मनुस्मृति या उसके जो विधान है, गांव फ्यूडल स्ट्रक्चर में जो गांव की जो आपसी नियम है, नियम मतलब जाति के आधार पे रेस्पेक्ट करना, जाति के आधार पे जैसे जो भूमिका हो उसको निर्वहन करना, या फिर इवन अच्छा कोई जैसे ये माना जाता है कि दलित कपड़ा भी अच्छा से ना पहने, अच्छा घर नहीं बनाए, तो अगर कोई अच्छा घर बनाता है भी है तो पुराना जो विधान है उसके हिसाब से वो उल्लंघन करता है गांव के दायरे में। हाँ, तो जो देखने को मिलता है कि गांव में जो जाति आधारित जो संरचना है, उसमें जब जो उपजातियां हैं, दलित के भीतर या आदिवासी के भीतर की उपजातियां, उनको उनके साथ भी जो सामाजिक न्याय का सवाल है वो बरकरार है। साथ में उसको कंट्रोल करने के लिए सामाजिक बहिष्कार किया जाता है, उनका सोशल एंड इकोनॉमिक बायकॉट कर दिया जाता है ताकि जाति बरकरार रहे। तो उसको रोकथाम के लिए, उसके प्रिवेंशन के लिए एक कानून आया जब महाराष्ट्र में नरेंद्र आंबेडकर जी के हत्या के बाद, जो एंटी कास्ट मूवमेंट के बाद जो महाराष्ट्र गवर्नमेंट ने लाया था सामाजिक बहिष्कार कानून, वो छत्तीसगढ़ में सन 2016-17 में 2016-17 में देन जो बीजेपी गवर्नमेंट था तब उसको लाने की, इंट्रोड्यूस कराने की कोशिश किया। लेकिन तमाम जो जातियां हैं, जो ओबीसी जातियां हैं, ट्राइबल जातियां हैं और दलित जातियों के जो बड़े जो डोमिनेंट उनके रिप्रेजेंटेटिव हैं, जो जाति संगठनों के, जाति पंचायतों के मुखिया हैं, सरकार के पास डेलीगेट किया और कहा कि यह सामाजिक बहिष्कार का कानून नहीं होना चाहिए। और उनका जो तर्क था, सामाजिक बहिष्कार के कानून आ जाने के बाद तो जातियों के आधार पर जो हम रूल करते हैं या शासन करते हैं, या जातियां जो टूट रही हैं, वो उसपे मतलब लगाम नहीं लग पाएगा, लोग बेलगाम हो जाएंगे और जाति टूट जाएगा। तो एक इस तरह की जातिवादी चेतना और ताकतें उस पर काम की। ये चीज को देखना पड़ेगा, आखिर तो कौन से फोर्सेस हैं उस जातियों के भीतर के, कौन से ताकतें हैं जो दलित आदिवासी जातियों के भीतर भी जाति को निरंतर बरकरार रखना चाहती है। और फिर हमारा जो सोशल जस्टिस का जो सवाल है, तो वो फिर कहा जाता है। दूसरा उदाहरण अभी हाल में जब 2022 में आप अगर देखें तो छत्तीसगढ़ का जो दक्षिण छत्तीसगढ़ का हिस्सा है, बस्तर के उदाहरण हमारे सामने। हम लोगों ने फैक्ट फाइंडिंग की क्या इससे, और करीब 150 घटनाओं का हमने तथ्यान्वेषण किया था। इस घटनाओं पे अमूमन हमने देखा कि जो सो कॉल्ड प्रोग्रेसिव और जो पूरा सिविल सोसाइटी ग्रुप्स के लोगों का जो कवायदें होती हैं, और जो पेशा कानून यहाँ भारत में जन आंदोलनों के मध्य इनके भी बड़ा प्रोग्रेसिव माना जाता है पेशा कानून, पंचायत एक्सटेंशन टू शेड्यूल्ड एरिया, ये कानून है जिसमें कि उसका रूल्स बनने हैं। और वो ये प्रावधान करता है कि जो अनुसूचित जनजाति, जो ट्राइबल कम्युनिटी है, उनका जो ऑटोनॉमी, उनका जो स्वशासन है, उसको वो बात करता है। लेकिन हुआ क्या कि परंपरागत ट्रेडिशनल जो चीजें थी, और उस कानून का असल में सांप्रदायिकरण, कम्युनलाइजेशन हो गया। और वो कानून जो कि नेचुरल रिसोर्सेज के आजादी के बाद वर्तमान के परिदृश्य में, लोकतांत्रिक परिवेश में जो संसाधनों का मैनेजमेंट करना था, प्रबंधन करना था, गांव का डेवलपमेंट के बारे में सोचना था, वो जातियां जो परंपरागत रूप से जो आदिवासी जातियां हैं, जो डोमिनेंट ट्राइबल के भीतर है, वो पेशा कानून के आड़ लेके, पेशा कानून के सहारा लेके उन्होंने वैसे लोगों को चिन्हांकित करना कोशिश कर दिया जो कि गैर हिंदू धर्म से संबंधित हैं, या कि जो लोग गांव के रीति नियम को, पुराने तरीकों को नहीं मानते हैं, जो पुरानी संस्कृति है, रहन सहन के तरीके हैं, उनको नहीं मानते हैं। तो उस कानून के साथ उनको गांव से भगाया जाने लगा, उनके जमीनों से उनको बेदखल कर दिया जाने लगा, उनके जो कब्र थे उनको कब्रों से भी मतलब मृत शव जो लाश है उनको उखाड़ के गांव की सीमा से बाहर ले जाया गया। तो ये जो कास्ट फॉर्मेशन है, मतलब जाति का पुनर्गठन जो है, जिन ट्राइबल्स में जाति नहीं है बोलते हैं, लेकिन किस तरह से ये ताकतें भी बहुत काम कर रही है कि जाति का पुनर्गठन हो, और वो जातियां जो कास्टलेस मानी जाती हैं, उन जातियों के को भी पुराने और परंपरागत प्राचीन नैरेटिव, प्राचीन कथाओं का उदाहरण देते हुए उनको कास्ट के दायरे में रहने को एक कानून भी सांप्रदायिक हो रहे हैं। ये स्टेट और नॉन स्टेट एक्टर तमाम एक्टर इसमें काम करते हैं। तो दो जो उदाहरण हैं हम देख पा रहे हैं, क्योंकि ट्राइबल में भी जो कुछ डोमिनेंट आते हैं उनके भीतर महिलाओं की जो प्रॉपर्टी के सवाल, मतलब समान नहीं है, संपत्ति का भी पुनर्वितरण नहीं है, उनका जो एक आंतरिक व्यवस्था है देश की आजादी के बाद लोकतांत्रिक परिवेश में जो डेमोक्रेटिक वैल्यूज हैं उस ट्रेडिशनल ग्राम सभा में नहीं, और आजादी के बाद जो पंचायत राज कानून है और ट्रेडिशनल जो कानून है उसमें कॉन्ट्राडिक्शन है। और जो जो आदिवासी के भीतर भी जो डोमिनेंट कास्ट जो पुरुष जो बुजुर्ग पुरुषों का जो शासन करने का जो उनका जो नियंत्रण है उसको बरकरार रखने के लिए इस तरह के कानूनों का और इस तरह के रास्ते पे जा रहे हैं। तो ये सवाल को भी जब तक हम जातियों के भीतर जो उपजातियां या असमानताएं हैं, भिन्नताएं हैं हमारी, उसके जाति दलित आदि जातियों के भीतर भी जो ये रक्त के शुद्धता का जो सवाल है, इसको अगर हम नहीं हल करेंगे, इस सवाल से अगर बचना चाहेंगे तो शायद जो सोशल जस्टिस का जो सवाल है अधूरा रह जाएगा। और जाति जो जनगणना है, जाति जनगणना होना चाहिए। जाति जनगणना होने से किस जातियों के पास कितनी उनकी प्रतिनिधित्व है सरकार में, स्टेट में, सोसाइटी में, वो तो एक सामने आएगा। लेकिन एक ईमानदार प्रयास भी हमको देखना पड़ेगा, हम अल्पसंख्यक जो दलित आदिवासी जातियां हैं उनके भीतर भी, कि हम तो एक लोकतांत्रिक परिवेश में एक सोशल जस्टिस के सवाल के साथ हम कैसे आगे बढ़े। क्योंकि हमने ये भी देखा कि जो ओबीसी जाति का जो हम अभी देख रहे हैं, ओबीसी जातियों में अधिकतर लैंडलॉर्ड कम्युनिटी है, और लैंडलॉर्ड कम्युनिटी है, और इनका जो लगभग किसान वर्ग से हैं। मगर जो दलित आदिवासियों के साथ भी उनका एक अंतर संबंध हम देखें तो शोषक और शोषित का ग्रामीण परिदृश्य में समझ में आता है। क्योंकि वो जो ओबीसी जातियां वही जो ब्राह्मणिकल जो ताकतें हैं, वो ब्राह्मणिकल स्टेट है उसके सपोर्टिंग फोर्स हैं, जो दलितों के साथ अनटचेबिलिटी करते हैं, आदिवासियों से जमीन छीनने का, ये तमाम तरह की चीजें भी हैं। तो ये जो सवाल है, ये सवाल को उठाया जाना भी साथ में बेहद महत्वपूर्ण है, क्योंकि इसके बिना लोकतांत्रिक परिवेश में जो सामाजिक न्याय की अवधारणा है और वह जो लक्ष्य है उसको प्राप्त करना मुश्किल होगा, ऐसा मेरा मानना है। तो ये सवाल मैं बस यही सवाल को हम इस परिचर्चा में मैं सामने लाना चाह रहा था, क्योंकि तमाम जो पूर्व बहुत सीनियर वरिष्ठ साथी लोगों ने बहुत से आयामों को छुआ, तो ये जो सवाल है, इस सवाल को मैं उठाना चाह रहा था। तो बहुत शुक्रिया, बस इतना ही मैं कहना चाहूंगा।
थैंक यू, आई एग्री विथ यू। आपका बहुत शुक्र अदा करते हैं कि आप हमारे इस इवेंट में आए। आपकी मौजूदगी ने हमारे इवेंट को बहुत कामयाब बनाया है। थैंक यू सो मच। Thank you. Without further ado, to offer some concluding remarks, let's welcome Rimsha Shahid, Research Analyst at South Asia Research Institute for Minorities. Over to you, Rimsha.
Thank you so much. And as we conclude this webinar, I extend my heartfelt gratitude to all our esteemed speakers for their invaluable contribution in shedding light on the crucial topic of caste census and its role in ensuring equal representation for minority rights. In today's world, marked by increasing social polarization, economic disparities, and political upheavals, the need for a comprehensive caste census has never been more pressing and important. As we confront the challenges of systemic discrimination, caste-based oppression, and identity-based violence, it is important that we confront these issues head-on with transparency, empathy, and with objective of resolve these issues. Our caste census not only provides us with a clearer understanding of the complex dynamics of caste-based discrimination, but also serves as a catalyst for societal transformation, fostering a more inclusive, equitable, and just society for all. Our discussion today has been deeply insightful, as all these speakers, Ms. Cynthia Stephen, Dr. Goldy George, Mr. Leslie Martin, and in last, Mr. Prasad Chouhan, brilliantly underscored the significance of the very census. Yes, in closing, it is imperative to recognize that the issue of caste census goes far beyond mere statistical enumeration. It actually represents a fundamental quest for social justice, equality, and inclusivity. And I would like to add a point here that in February 2023, Pakistan has initiated its very first digital census, introducing a distinct category for scheduled caste population, signifying a significant step towards recognizing and addressing the unique needs of these communities. The underlying purpose of this legislative initiative is to grant SCs a distinct and elevated status within society. So yes, I think by accurately capturing caste data, we can pave the way for evidence-based policy making, targeted intervention, and the effective implementation of affirmative action programs. Moreover, caste census serves as a powerful tool for amplifying the voices of marginalized communities, empowering them to assert their rights and claim their rightful place within society and community. Yes, thank you for being a part of this significant dialogue and for your dedication to the cause of minority rights. I hope our shared commitment be the force that transforms challenges into opportunities and struggles into success. Thank you for your active participation and dedication. Over to you, Zehra.
Thank you, our panelists, and Amsha Shahid, for their valuable insight. On behalf of South Asia Research Institute for Minorities, I would like to extend a heartfelt thank you to everyone who joined us today. Let's continue our efforts to promote equality, justice, and representation for all marginalized communities. Until next time, take care of yourself, stay safe, goodbye, good luck.